This song was originally written by Leanne Scott, and it was originally sung by Susan Ray in 1971. And it just proves how much of an impact LAX has on society, because LAX is the only airport that has its own theme song. And it was nationally declared its theme song a couple of years ago, so it was official. And just because of its unique history, its unique characteristics that don't belong to basically any other airports, and its very unique and ambitious plans for the future, sets LAX apart from everybody else and just makes it one unique airport that's very interesting to learn about. And its history all began basically when California was still a part of Mexico, and it just kept switching hands. And then California became a part of the United States, and it came into the possession of Andrew Bennett. And since he had all of this land, he just decided to lease it out to a bunch of tenant farmers, and just to a bunch of different people who just had little pieces of his farm. And since he did have so much land, word eventually got out, and a bunch of pioneer aviators, as they were called, just basically came and just flew their planes for fun. And eventually, the national air races took place at this place which had now become known as Mines Field. And because of this race, the Mines Field got national recognition, or at least local recognition. And so Los Angeles decided to buy the airport, or buy the land. And so in October of 1928, LAX they gave up the lease basically for Mines Field, and they bought Mines Field, and they decided to call it LA Municipal Airport. And from that point on, it hadn't become commercial or anything yet, so it was just used for different purposes. And one of the uses was in World War II. It was used for military flights, because it made sense because California's on the coast, and it just had close proximity to Japan and other countries for all the militaries, just easy access to fly to, basically. And then in 1946, LA Municipal Airport became a commercial airport, and at that time, just when it first began, 5 airport chains joined it, and obviously since then it's grown. But then in 1961, the present building was built, like the present structure that's used today, and that includes the theme building, which you saw up there. You probably don't know what it is, but it is on the front of this book. The theme building is right here. It's basically the most prominent thing on LAX besides the control tower, and it's just the unique shape and everything, and I'll talk about the structures inside it later. And then in the 1980s, they added additional terminals, and they also added a roadway on the second floor, which is really unique because it's usually on the first floor. And so at this point, if you want to look at your handouts, on the second page, it's right here, it talks about the terminals, and it has them all labeled. And what's unique about LAX is that they don't have one straight up hub. They just have the Tom Bradley International Terminal, which is the main building, but then the rest of the terminals just all take place off that. Actually, turn to the very back. Those are the terminals. And it shows all the different airlines that have their place at those terminals, and it just shows how large they actually are. And then in 1996, they built a new control tower that took over the old one. And the new tower is 277 feet tall. And because of the new tower, the old tower was then taken over by the Department of Aviation, and they just used it basically for office space. And LAX also has many unique characteristics that just set it apart from everybody else. And overall, they have 80 passenger carriers and 20 cargo carriers, and many of those, most of you have probably heard of because they are major airlines. And in 2003, 54.9 million people went in and out of LAX basically using it. And although these numbers seem amazingly huge, it did drop 2.25% from 2002. So that is a little decrease, but they're still amazing numbers. And LAX is the 5th busiest airport in the world as far as passenger air flights go. And it's 3rd in the U.S. behind Hartford-Jackson in Atlanta and O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And obviously, because it's such a large building and such a large structure, it just has a huge economic impact on Los Angeles and the 5-county Southern California region. And it has $60 billion economic thing overall, and $21 billion of this is just an economic impact for Los Angeles alone. And you have about 58,000 jobs in the airport itself, and then I think 408,000 for just the surrounding area, and all of the jobs that don't take place directly in Los Angeles, or in the airport, but take place in Los Angeles and all the surrounding areas, but are still related to the airport. And in fact, 1 in 20 jobs in Southern California are either influenced or are at LAX. And the structure is also important because it has, first of all, you have the amazingly tall control tower, and then it has 4 parallel runways. And these runways reach from 8,925 feet to 12,090 feet. And I have a picture that I'll pass around here. You can't really see any of the structures like prominently as far as buildings go, but you can see the 4 parallel runways and how large they are in comparison to everything else. And because of LAX's close proximity to like all the manufacturing nations like Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the customs for LAX and just Los Angeles, the customs district is second in the United States for obvious reasons, just because they have so much cargo and imports and exports that are going in and out of LAX. It is, in fact, it is 6th in cargo carriage, and last year 2 million tons of cargo went in and out of LAX. And about 50% of this was international freight materials. And there are 1,000 cargo flights that take place per day at LAX. And for the people that go there, the tourists, there are about 20,000 plus parking spaces, and they have many different modes of transportation. They have like a monorail type thing, or I think they called it an air train. And there are many different buses, shuttles, taxis, all that different stuff. And they have many different shops. They have brand name restaurants, theme restaurants, unique ones. They have newsstands, gift shops, and they have duty-free shops, which basically don't have taxes on all of their materials, just for the international people to go in and out of LAX. And one of the principal restaurants is called Encounter, and that's inside the theme building that we talked about before, and it's 70 feet off the ground, and it's basically, it gives the people that are dining there a panoramic view. They can see all around them. And the thing that's unique about that is that its interior is very futuristic, and it's supposed to be designed to represent the space age. And the Los Angeles Fire Department has lots of materials at LAX just simply for LAX. And it's just, they have a thing called Crash Tender number 3, I believe, and that's the fire truck that's just there all the time. They're on call 24 hours for any emergency that may happen at LAX. There are also many futuristic, or plans for the future basically, that are being put into effect to ensure that LAX will still be a prominent structure in the U.S. landscape to come. And just recently they developed independent satellite terminals, which are off of the main building, like I said, and the customers, the people that are flying, just get a bus to go to U.S. Customs. And so it's really easily accessible, and just it helps with overcrowding. And recently the federal government gave $256 million to improve a baggage claim at LAX to make the line shorter and all that stuff. And they've already spent $90 million on safety improvements and just overall improvements for the airport. And in October of 2004, Mayor James Hahn proposed a $9.1 billion plan to increase safety at the airport. And $3 billion has already been approved, $8 billion has yet to be approved, and there are still a lot of procedural hoops that the plan still has to go through to become approved, per se, and to actually be put into action. And so just because of its unique characteristics, its great history, its great futuristic plans, LAX is one of the most unique airports in the world and is so intriguing. That's why it influences society such a great deal, and that's why it's so well known. It's just because of its uniqueness. Missing Wigs by Janet Palazzo Craig, and Paul Harvey did the illustration. This was a quiet evening at 227 Woodbine Road. Everything was quite cozy. Elwood R. Fox, Esquire, was lighting a fire in the fireplace. "Look at that blaze, dear," he called to his wife, Hollyhocks. She looked up from the book she was reading. "Very nice, dear," she said. Their two children were in the den. Sly was practicing his saxophone. His little sister Sally sat on the floor. She was playing with her pet chicken, Cluck. Sly thought Cluck was dumb. "Keep that Cluck away from me," said Sly. "Go blow your horn," said Sally. Sisters, thought Sly. He had just begun the first notes of Swing Me on a Star when there was a loud knock at the front door, then another and another. "Who come up at this hour?" said Elwood. He opened the door. There stood Ruthie Rabbit, their next-door neighbor. Ruthie was a fancy dresser. She was wrapped in a thick coat of white fur. She was wearing dark sunglasses with sparkles on the rims. Ruthie also wore diamond earrings, 3 pairs of them, for her ears were quite long. She looked very glamorous, except for one thing. Her hair was a mess. Usually Ruthie wore a wig of blonde curls, or red curls, or long black hair. Ruthie had quite a lot of wigs, but today her hair looked awful. All in all, Elwood was not too surprised to see Ruthie. Ruthie had a way of showing up. And when she did, it was always with news, and the news was never good. "Goodness gracious, I had to tell you. I just don't know what to do," Ruthie said. "They're gone, gone, I tell you, and so is the necklace. Nowhere to be found. I shall tear out my hair." Ruthie went on and on. By now, all of the foxes had come into the hallway to see what was going on. "I shall tear out my hair," continued Ruthie. "If I may make a suggestion," interrupted Elwood politely, "I don't believe that tearing out your hair will do one bit of good. Now come inside and tell us what exactly is the problem. Begin at the beginning." Elwood could be very logical at times. They seated Ruthie in front of the fire. Everyone gathered around her. "I came right over to warn you. There's a thief in our midst. I was at tea today at Madame Miranda Panda's. The most awful thing happened. Her emerald necklace is missing. It was taken almost before our eyes." The foxes were speechless. They knew of the beautiful necklace and its rich owner, Miranda Panda. "But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is that someone has taken all of my wigs, every last one. The blonde one, the curly one, the long black one, the short one, and the red one, too. Who would want my wigs?" Elwood raised his eyebrows. The little foxes raised their eyebrows. "Who indeed?" asked Elwood. The next morning, Sly was awakened by a squawk. It was Cluck. "Shut that darn clock up," said Sly. "Go sit on an egg," said Sally. "Wake up, let's figure out a way to find the emerald necklace." "And Ruthie's wigs," Sly added. The little foxes went outside to the small chicken coop behind the house. No chickens lived in the coop anymore. They had all disappeared a long time ago, except, of course, for Cluck. All day they planned and plotted. They plotted and planned. They only came outside for lunch, gooseberry and peanut butter sandwiches with milk. Detective work was a hungry business. That night, Hollyhocks and Elwood tucked their children into bed. Hollyhocks sat down and opened her book. Elwood put a record on the phonograph. The moon rose high over all the houses on Woodbine Road. By and by, Sly heard a little squawk. It was Sally's chicken. "Come on, let's go," whispered Sally. On tiptoes, the little foxes, with Cluck close behind them, sneaked down the back steps. Under the moonlight, they trotted along until they came to Miranda Panda's mansion. Inch by inch, they tiptoed closer. The foxes sneaked inside. They crawled under a table. Their noses peeked out from under the lace tablecloth. "Do you see who I see?" asked Sally. "She sure gets around," said Sly. For there, dressed in a white fur coat and wearing sunglasses with sparkles on their rims, was Ruthie Rabbit. But her hair wasn't a mess anymore. She was wearing a wig of long black hair. She was wearing 3 pairs of earrings, too, but somehow her ears looked different. Suddenly, Cluck flew out from under the table. He flew straight at Ruthie's ears, squawking loudly the whole time. Ruthie clutched at her ears, but something strange happened. One of the ears fell right off, crashed to the floor, earrings and all. Sly and Sally rushed out from beneath the tablecloth. Sly picked up the ear. "This is not a rabbit's ear," he announced. Everyone, including Miranda Panda, had gathered around by this time. "And this," said Sally, "is not Ruthie Rabbit's." She pulled at the long black hair, and off it came. There stood the famous thief, Sticky Claws J. Sticky Claws was a jailbird, known far and wide for his clever disguises. But now, standing there with one ear on and one ear off, he looked more than a bit foolish. His blue tail feather stuck out from beneath the white coat. His handbag was packed with stolen jewels. "Curses upon you!" cried Sticky Claws, pointing to Sally and Sly. "And a pox on that drat chicken!" "You clever foxes!" exclaimed Miranda. "You have found the thief. We must celebrate." As they led Sticky Claws away, everyone agreed that a party to honor Sally and Sly, and Cluck too, of course, should be held. The next night there was dancing and singing and plenty to eat. Everyone was invited. Ruthie Rabbit, the real Ruthie, was there. And this time she was wearing a curly red wig. For back at Sticky Claws' nest, they had found the rest of Ruthie's wigs. And the emerald necklace, too. Miranda Panda made a very nice speech. She thanked Sally and Sly for catching the thief. Everyone cheered. Elwyn and Hollyhocks were proud. "Goodness gracious," said Ruthie as she rushed over to Sly and Sally. "I must thank you for helping me to find my wigs. To think that that scoundrel thought he could get away with such a thing. But how did you figure out who the thief was?" "It wasn't hard," said Sly. "You might say we owe it all to the luck of a Cluck," said Sally. India is the second largest country population-wise, with 1,065,070,607 people. It is also home to the 4th, 7th, and 8th largest cities in the world. In fact, India makes up 16.5% of the 6 billion people that live on this earth. And perhaps some of you have experienced the culture of India, probably without even realizing it, through their unique foods, customs, or even their clothing. One specific type of clothing that I'm going to demonstrate to you how to put on today is the sari. And I will be showing you how to put on the undergarments, how to put on the actual sari, and also 3 different ways of putting on the sari. So, to put on the undergarments, first you start with the skirt, which is referred to as the petticoat. And what you want to do is just step right into it, just like any other skirt. And you want to make sure that the height, or that the length is appropriate to your height, and so it should either be just touching the ground or just above your feet. And I like to put it just above my feet so that you won't be able to see it once you put on the sari. And just pull the drawstring like this. And next you put on the top part, which is called the blouse. You just put this on like any other jacket, and you have the hook and eyes. You just put these on. After you get the undergarments on, you'll want to go and put on the actual sari. And when I put this on, there's a couple of pointers that you have to look for. This is called the palu, and you want this to be on the opposite end that you're starting out with, because you want that to be in the front at the very end, so that everyone can, so that you can show that off basically, because it's the most fancy part. On the bottom right here is also sort of like reinforcement, and you always have to make sure that that's facing inward so that people don't see it. It basically just protects the bottom of the sari so that when you're walking you don't rip it or anything like that. Your first step is to put the sari around your waist one time, and when you're doing this you have to make sure that the sari is the right length. And once you get the right length, you just tuck it in to your petticoat at that spot. You go around your waist once with the sari. You always have to be careful and make sure that it's the same length all the way around, and that in the back it just doesn't get longer. After you go around your waist once, you're going to want to make pleats in the front. In order to do that, they should be about 8 to 12 inches coming out, and what you do, you just hold it out there. And I usually make 4 or 5. 3, 4, or 5 is basically the general rule for that. And when you're making your pleats, you have the first pleat, and then the next pleat that you make should be maybe an inch out from the previous one, so that you have that variation. And when you're making these pleats, you should like shake it down so that the pleats go all the way down to the floor. And again, make sure that it's at the right height. You have the third one that goes farther out. Fourth one. And once you get all 5 of your pleats, or however many you're going to do, just take that, and you can see the 5 pleats that go down right there, and you just tuck that in, and you want the pleats to be in the center, basically. And if there's still any problems with the pleats, you just try to straighten them out as best you can. Your next step is to take the sari and put it underneath your left armpit, or you basically just take it around your back and don't put it over your armpits. And so once you bring it around your back, you take the end with the palu and you make pleats up top, and you make those about 8 inches as well. This part is kind of hard to make it look good because you have to get the pleats to be constant all the way down, because you're going to throw this over your shoulder, and if it's not constant all the way down, or if the fabric's twisted in some way, then it will look funny and you won't have pleats down on the bottom when you put it across your chest. So your next step is just to throw it over your left shoulder, and this is the traditional way of wearing it, and because it's folded and you have your arm exposed and everything. And to show off the palu, you can either go like this and just tuck a corner of it into your petticoat to show it like that, or some people just prefer to hold it. And then the more modern way that the younger girls prefer to wear is to have it loose around your arm instead of folding it up on your shoulder. And they just hold on to it and you show off the and like this. And then the third way that you can, the third variation is called the Gujarati style, and it's basically just another territory, and so it's just cultural regional differences, much like we have in the U.S. between like South and North and all that. So you don't really have to fold it, but instead of going underneath your right arm, you go over your right shoulder and you bring it around this way, and then you just hold it like this, so you're still showing the Bula. Yeah. And that is the third way to do that. And then once you have your style that you want, many of them choose to put on a bindi, which just goes on your forehead. This. And you have the bracelets, and these are glass bracelets, so you have to be very careful. And the bracelets have to be even on each side, so you have to have an even number. I have 5 on each wrist. And a little background on the sari itself, they're all hand sewn, and you can see over here it has all of the gems and things like that. Those are all sewn on by hand as well. And there are many just different variations, different cloths and everything that you can use for the sari. So, in showing you how to put on the undergarments, how to put on the actual sari, and different ways to put on the sari, I hope that you've learned how, and maybe learned more about the culture of India than you knew before, and you've realized how beautiful these are, and just the history with them because they're handmade and all of that, and how much work went into them. And I hope you'll appreciate them more, and whenever you see it on TV or just in the street, you'll realize that there's some background behind the saris, and they do have a great amount of significance. My speech, 2 people needed blood transfusions. Every 2 seconds, somebody in the U.S. needs a blood transfusion, and only 5% of the eligible donors in the United States give their blood. The supply is low, but the demand is so amazingly high. And if the demands aren't met, there are dire consequences. People will die. We need to do our part to meet this demand. We need to donate our blood and make a difference in our world. Blood itself has about 4 purposes in general. It carries oxygen through the bloodstream, it distributes nutrients, and it removes waste from the body. In addition, it also helps transport the important defense mechanisms in our body. Now, blood is produced in the bone marrow, which is the jelly-like substance within your bones, and blood can be transfused whole, or it can be divided into its 3 components. And this is just done depending on the specific situation of either somebody having a surgery and what they specifically need, or just an accident, or if somebody has cancer. Now, the 3 different components are the red blood cells, the plasma, and the platelets. And they're all sort of done in a different way. Whole blood, most people are familiar with. The way that it's taken out is just through 1 IV. They just take it all out. It takes about 15 minutes. Platelets are removed through a process called pheresis or apheresis. It's the same thing. And what kind of persuasive speaker would I be if I told you to do something but didn't do it myself? So to help explain the process of pheresis, I would like to take you sort of on a tour of my trip to the Red Cross. Here is the building that you initially go in, and then you'll go in the building and you walk past the whole blood, and this is the pheresis donor room, as you can see. You go in, and since it was my first time donating, they had to take my history. They just asked me a bunch of questions, and then after they take your history, that took about 15 minutes, they put you in the main room, and what they have to do is they have to put IVs in both of your arms. And you can't really see it, but underneath the paper towels are where my IVs are. And they cover you up with heating pads. I had a heating pad on top and on bottom, and with comforters, so that your blood keeps circulating while you're giving blood. And I had to squeeze the stress ball because this was my output arm, and so the blood had to be continually flowing out of there. So you just had to make sure that that was circulating the whole time. And so they take your whole blood out of this arm, and then what happens is that it goes into this machine, and the blood goes into a centrifuge inside the machine, and then it separates the red blood cells out first, and then it separates some of the plasma from the platelets. It has to keep some of the plasma to preserve the platelets in storage and different things like that. And then what they do is they send some of the plasma and the red blood cells back into your input arm. And this is what mine is, right here. After that's over, she let me, you can't really see that, but after the procedure, she let me take out my blood. And up on top, you have the red blood cells, and then down below right here is my plasma, and the platelets are those horizontal stripe things. And that is my nurse. Her name's Pam. She was really nice. Got me candy, water, whatever you wanted. You got to watch a movie while you were donating. And just everybody there was really nice. It was just an awesome experience to be able to do something, and the only thing it really cost me was my time. And I felt like I was really making a difference, but I didn't have to pay or really give anything but my time. Like any good blood donor, after I donated my blood, you have to replenish the sugars in your body. I'm eating a donut and orange juice just to keep up the nutritional value in my body. And besides just platelet donation, everybody needs regular transfusions as well. There's people that will die if they don't get daily transfusions or weekly transfusions. According to the Red Cross, a child with leukemia needs about 30 to 40 units of platelets every week. And platelets only last about 10 days in the bloodstream, so it constantly has to be replenished and replenished so that they're able to survive. The causes of this extreme epidemic, if you will, is that there's no substitute for human blood. There is a prototype for artificial blood, but it hasn't been approved in the U.S., and it doesn't have the benefits that human blood does. So the only way that people are going to get their transfusions are through humans who donate their own blood. In addition, blood can't even be stored or stockpiled in any way. It can be stored for a short period of time, but it can't be held for years and years, so that when there's a large need, they can't just have a huge bank there. Every day, the Red Cross is about 48 hours away from being empty. So at any given time, they're 2 days away from not having any blood left in their bank. In order to solve this epidemic and be able to supply those that need blood with blood, you could just simply donate blood. Contact your Red Cross, set up an appointment. It's very easy. They're very accommodating. You just need to set up your appointment and go and donate blood. It's as simple as that. If you don't want to take a trip to the Red Cross, you could donate at a blood drive that's being organized that you know about. According to the American Red Cross, 80% of the donations they receive are given in blood drives. So it's obviously a very effective way to donate blood and get others to donate blood. If you're not eligible to donate blood, you have to be 17 years or older or 110 pounds or heavier. You could organize a blood drive, which you don't have to be blood donor, weight, and age, and all that. And what the Red Cross needs is sponsors. And all sponsors have to do is to get the donors, set up appointments for the donors, and provide a physical space for the blood drive to take place in. They will provide all the necessary materials that you may need, all of the workers. They provide that. All you have to do is basically provide a place and people for the blood drive to occur. Many argue that the blood, when it's transfused to others, may be contaminated, may have diseases, or it might be the wrong blood type, which has fatal consequences. But according to the Red Cross, they check and recheck for blood type, first of all, and then they send it to the hospital where it's to be transfused, and the hospital checks again. So they're obviously very careful about the blood type, because if somebody receives the wrong blood type, they're going to die, most likely, just because of the reactions that occur within your body when you have the wrong blood type. And as far as contaminants go, the Red Cross does tests for AIDS, HIV, syphilis, and other diseases that are transfused through the blood or that travel through the blood. And they do that over and over just because they don't want to have a lawsuit on their hands, obviously. And they want the blood to be safe to be transfused to those that need it. A person receiving a heart transplant only needs about 4 to 6 units of blood, but an otherwise healthy teenager who gets in an accident may need over 100 units of blood. If you're the one that gets in that accident, you want the reserves to be there so that you'll be able to survive. But if you're not giving your blood, how do you know that it's going to be there when you actually need it? If you're not giving it to other people, how do you know that the reserve is going to be there when you need it if you have an accident? And there's a 97% chance that someone you know is going to need a blood transfusion at some time. So if you donate, there's a high chance that you're going to be giving it to somebody that you know. And so that not only does it it makes you feel better about if you have an accident or not, but somebody close to you may have an accident, and it'll make you feel better about that as well. According to the Red Cross of Indiana, 450 people a day in the Indiana-Ohio region need to give blood to keep the reserves up. And like I said before, at any given time, the Red Cross is 48 hours away from empty. I encourage you to be one of those 450 people each day who give blood. It's not that hard. You can give every 8 weeks if you're donating whole blood. And if you're donating platelets, you can donate every 3 days for a maximum of 24 times a year. In 1981, 5.5 million people donated blood. And that may seem like a great number, but in 20 years that number hasn't changed at all. So I encourage you to go to your local Red Cross, their address, and if you've never heard of this address or don't know where it is, it's basically across from the Coliseum. So if you go over there, you'll see it from Coliseum Boulevard. I encourage you to contact them. If you really want to write a letter, you can, but you can call that number, set up an appointment, and you can donate blood. And I guarantee you will feel good about it, simply because you're donating your time so that you're saving a life. If you donate 1 pint of blood, you can save up to 3 lives just because it can be divided into its different parts. So I encourage you to donate your time because you will feel good about what you do and you will be making a difference for this world, and we can help stop this epidemic that is the lack of blood donors. Even if their attitude is a little over the top, one cannot deny the effect a positive person will have on a negative day. Likewise, Leanna seems to have that impact on all of those around her, including myself. Her contagious laugh and her infectious personality instantly put a smile on the face of anyone who comes in contact with her. Leanna was born in New Jersey to a college professor and a teacher. Even though she often woke up screaming in the middle of the night due to night terrors, no one can deny that Leanna was as positive as a child as she is today. Although Leanna has had many positive events in her life, she has also endured a number of hardships to get where she is today. One day, when she was a teenager, Leanna returned home to find out that one of her closest friends had died in a car accident. Not only did the death of her one friend break up her close-knit group of friends, but it also led Leanna to question her faith. Ever since I have known Leanna, she has always set a wonderful example for me. Whether it be selflessly donating her time to help her husband out with our youth group, or simply taking time out to explain her faith and give us advice on our petty high school problems. However, being only a teenager, Leanna had no clue what lay ahead for her. Her friend's death led her to question her faith. How could God have taken away someone so dear to her? Eventually, however, and with much prayer no doubt, Leanna was able to deal with her death. Leanna graduated high school and attended Asbury College in Wilmore, Kentucky. It is at Asbury that Leanna met her future husband, Dave Wilson. Dave and Leanna's relationship, as I perceive it, is one of complete adoration and devotion. Their relationship has provided a solid example for what a true loving relationship should look like. It is not a relationship based on today's standards, but one that transcends superficial love to one of absolute love. Today, Leanna and Dave have a daughter named Carly, and they're awaiting the birth of their second child. A second child Leanna had to endure dealt with yet another car crash. A few years ago, on the day after Christmas, Leanna's father was driving in icy conditions. Dr. Jarvis, her father, got into a nearly fatal car crash. Although he was originally sitting in the driver's seat, Leanna's father was found in the back seat after the crash occurred. Thankfully, Mr. Jarvis survived the crash. However, he was in a coma for about a month, paralyzed, and forced to wear a halo for an extended period of time. For those of you who don't know, a halo is basically a metal hoop that they screwed into his skull to keep his body aligned. Anyone who sees someone they love so dearly in this position would have perfect justification for breaking down or letting the fear and memories get the best of them. But I assure you that these excuses never entered Leanna's mind. Of course she was affected on the inside, but outwardly, Leanna strove to put others first. She supported her mother and brothers, even though she herself was hurting inside. Fortunately, her father has improved a great deal since that horrible day in December. Leanna is so very important to me personally for all of the time she has helped me. when it seemed like nobody else cared. I understand that she probably doesn't even realize that she was making a difference in my life as she continues to do. But she was. Even though it felt like nobody else was there, she would not only remind me that she was there for me, but that God was constantly there as well. She reiterated the fact that my Lord would never leave me or forsake me, especially when I needed Him most. She would help me through every little problem, no matter how little or insignificant it seemed to me or anyone else. When a fairly serious relationship ended for me, I was pretty upset. Although I put on a facade and told everyone I was okay and that it was not a big deal, Leanna was the only one who stopped for me in my mask. I remember her taking me aside one night just to talk through it all, which I appreciated a great deal. I tend to be a fairly private person and keep my feelings on the inside for fear of getting hurt. But Leanna helped me to talk about my feelings. She helped me to realize that God has a reason for everything and that the best is yet to come. One specific forte of Leanna's is playing the piano. She has been playing since she was young and therefore has become one of the best piano players I know, if not the best. Even with her enormous talent, Leanna refuses to get a big head. She's always willing to give others tips and spend some of her time sharing her talent by teaching others how to play. In this way, Leanna is furthering a love for music that is quickly becoming obsolete in our world of increasing technology. One of the fondest memories that I personally got to share with Leanna was our trip to Asbury College, her alma mater. There was a sort of class reunion wherein Leanna's college jazz band was reunited. Not only was this trip a chance for me to hear Leanna play the piano, but it also gave me a chance to get to know her better. Although there are no particular instances that stand out in my mind, the one thing I do remember is that I was constantly being entertained. Whether it was by Leanna's stories about her life before becoming a pastor's wife, or simply her infectious laughter filling the minivan as we drove down the Kentucky highway. Leanna has and always will be the sister I always wanted but never had. She's the one with whom I can joke around, have a serious conversation, or the one who can give me advice at a moment's notice. It is for this never-ending dependability and reliability that I would like to present Leanna with this World's Best Mentor Award. Leanna, thank you so much for all you have done for me. I don't think you realize how much you actually mean to me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and you never cease to amaze me. And on the certificate it says, Leanna, I chose to put Dave and Carly on this certificate because I know they are the two most important things to you, besides God. Thank you for all you do. You don't know how much you mean to me and everyone you come in contact with. You deserve this honor. Love, Megan.
This is really neat because you know that you're teaching somebody else and that they're learning, and it's really cool feeling.